Okay, so what was going to happen was I was supposed to be at Stramagart London last weekend, and I would like to show you a couple of pieces of work that would have been shown at that place had it gone ahead. But of course, tragically, it was cancelled very last minute, and we took some nice pieces of work out of the kiln, both me and Margaret, and basically, if I show you a couple of pieces first, you can kind of see where I'm at the moment, and then I want to backtrack. So rather than show you an example, a demonstration of what I'm up to now, what I'd like to do is really go back a little bit and show you the progression from maybe 10 or more years ago when I first started to do this work. So this first piece, this started out with 50 kilos of reasonably soft clay, and there are quite a number of techniques in this in this piece. It's been stretched and cut. 50 kilos of clay is it's quite a handful, to be honest. If you imagine this being completely solid, but its original form would be really quite a chunk, quite a lot bigger than this. So if you think of taking, say, 4 bags of clay, piling them on top of each other, that's the kind of size it started out. And what I did was I took a slicing knife, carved out the area that I wanted to be. I wanted it to have a real nice contrast between smooth, hard, and the rough of what we might regard as a kind of an organic feel. And that was the starting point. And then I pulled away the texture and applied bits of oxide here and there. There's a celadon glaze on here. This particular one, this area is has a coating on it. This is what I call Curtis texture paste that I developed a few years ago. If you want to ever pursue that, you can go onto YouTube, and if you type in Eddie Curtis texture paste on YouTube, you'll see there's a demonstration there, and it demonstrates how to apply this and what it can do and what it's all about. Move on to another piece of work. And this one came from the same kiln, a purely sculptural piece. This one, again, this one has Curtis texture paste on both sides, with using the 3 different colours that I've developed. And when I took this from the kiln, it was really it was full of surprise, to be quite honest, because I'd intended these areas here to be absolutely black and shiny, and it was one of those situations where you take something from the kiln, it's not really quite what you expect, and then when you start to look at it, you think, my goodness, yeah, it's a nice kind of happy accident, that. And I was really very, very pleased with the way this one turned out. And the bit of demonstration that I'm going to do in a moment, it shows you how to create these. Well, these look like layers, but you'll see there's a bit of story in that. They're not really layered at all. It gives the impression of say strata lines in the landscape. You know, if you go out walking, you go up a hillside, and you might see a rocky outcrop, and you've got nice vertical lines in, and that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to capture here. But taking us back, if we go back maybe, I think this was possibly made 10 or 12 years ago, and you know, when you have, say, you've got a piece of stiff clay and it's just gone off too much, you can't really make much with it, you can just about get the blade through it, and you want to recycle it. And I was messing one day with some clay that I was about to recycle, and I took a blade, and this was maybe a chunk this big that had just gone too hard, a bag that hadn't been sealed up properly, and I took a blade to it and I started to cut it up into smaller sections, so that when I put it into water to recycle it, it would reconstitute much quicker, because obviously the smaller the piece, the quicker I'm going to be able to reclaim it. And this isn't the very first one I made. This was made as a result of that happy accident, if you like. But the very first one I made, it was never ever seriously going to be a pot. It's just that when I was observing it, I thought, my goodness, that really reminds me of things that I have seen. And it became a starting point for a number of works. And at the time, as silly as it might seem, I actually thought at the time that I'd invented some kind of technique, but I was later to find that Kurinuki, as it's called, where Kurinuki in Japanese means to withdraw, to take away. So I realised that technique had been in Japan for many years, and I kind of stumbled across it by accident. And that very first piece would have been made around about 2008. It's in a private collection now. It was bought a lot of years ago, and altogether I only made maybe 4 or 5 particularly like that one, because I tended to develop and move away from there to see where the technique would take me. So if I can just give you an idea of how this very first piece came about almost accidentally. So this board I'm working on, this is fireproof board. I can put a torch on here, no problem. It's the kind of stuff that you'd line out a new bathroom with, or a shower room. It's better than plasterboard because it's completely solid. It doesn't rot. It's wonderful in a bathroom, but it also lends itself fantastically to use in the pottery. Its trade name is it's actually called Hardybacker, and you can buy that at a DIY store. But the reason it's safe in this kind of environment, if we go back a long time, there was a substance called asbestolux, and all potteries had asbestolux in, and it was really nice for drying out the bottoms of pots. You could knead on it, and this replaced asbestolux. And the beauty of this contains no paper or gypsum. So basically, it's not a problem if a tiny bit splinters off and it finds its way into your clay. It's not hygroscopic. It's a cement board, and it's really rather safe. But it tends not to break anywhere. It's really quite robust. So if we take a piece of clay, this is reasonably quite firm. It's not as hard as leather, but it's getting that way. And then if we just think of, if I was roughly trying to make this a bit smaller for the recycled bucket, I might want to cut it down, and that's how I started the process. But then when we pull it away and we stretch it at the bottom, and because this clay isn't completely stiff, you will get a lovely tear off down the bottom. And this is how I tend to prefer to work with the clay that isn't completely dried out. It isn't very stiff. It means it's easy to work with, and you also get that nice stretch out. So if we continue that one, this was bought at a cake decorating shop, and very useful little palette knife. Can I just show you that, just in case you can't see how that looks? I've no idea what the video quality of this is like on Facebook. Afterwards, I'll have to review it and see where we can go with this on the next occasion. But for now, it is what it is. So I can take a knife down here, problem of demonstrating for you is I have to work on top of myself. Normally I would be working like this, but you're not going to see anything. So I'm going to work on top of myself, and we'll just see how far we can get with that. And we can take out another one. So as you can see, you can progress. Now the beauty of this is, if you don't actually like, let's say you take out a little section and you're not happy with it, well, so what, big deal. All you do is you cut off the front face and you can start again. And this is the beauty of working with a piece of solid clay. If I tried to slab this up, it would have an absolute finite thickness, and it's not quite so forgiving as this will be. If we just continue with this one, so what we're trying to achieve is kind of a rock face, if you like. And you can go as organic as you want. You can maintain an absolute rectangular shape. The world's your oyster. You can put them in diagonally. You can do. I'm going to continue with this one with a vertical kind of natural strata. And that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Now, I always think it's nice to have a pot that's risen up off the ground just a little. So if we can work just take some vigorous pieces out, make it stand off the ground just a bit. We can make that bottom edge look maybe just a little more realistic. This is a cake decorating knife, and I've took an angle grinder and took the edge off there. It means that when I'm driving down and I'm pulling out, I get a nice square edge at this point. You can see these edges are quite square. Which is the same reason I use this nice square tool here. It pulls off nice and square. It gives a more convincing look if you're wanting to emulate cleaved rock that's fallen off a rock face, that kind of thing. So just finish this bottom off. So while that's still solid, I'm going to turn that one upside down, just trim out the bottom just a little. I think you should have a very, very similar approach to, quite a vigorous approach to the bottom if you've got a vigorous approach to the actual work itself. So that is just kind of dug out like you might want to do with, if you're making a tea ball and you want to take out the centre of a tea ball, you'd have a very, very similar kind of procedure to that. So now what we do is take a needle and we can delineate the edge by holding your finger on the outside surface, take the needle around just to give you an idea of how thick you want the piece. It's personal preference at the end of the day. None of these pieces will ever float away. If it looks like a rock, I think it should feel like a rock. So I'm very, very happy to have a certain amount of weight in these. Just cut down there to make the separation easier. The process of withdrawing can now start, and a nice big scoop out of the centre can get us going. Then we can follow the edge around and withdraw the centre of the piece. Now this is really, I like doing this because especially if let's say I've made the solid piece the day before and I come out on the morning, and it's always pretty difficult to get going on the morning, and it's not that it's mindless, it's just that it's quite a common kind of thing to do, and it's just a nice gentle process to gradually take the middle out, being very, very careful not to burst through the outsides. The further you go down, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the outer surface. So basically what I tend to do is, at this point, I'll take the torch that just stiffens the outside just enough. It creates a kind of a slight crispness to it, and if I work fast enough I can get more out of the inside without disturbing the outside too much. So I think basically you have the idea of the process. What I'm not going to do is stand here and hollow all this out, because you'll all fall asleep, and it's enjoyable to do, but it's like watching paint dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just keep roughing this out so I can come back to it at a later stage. I'm going to spend maybe another half a minute on it, and then we can just talk about the outside surface. This is really lovely clay, and it's nice to work with. It's very forgiving. It comes from Scarva, and it's earthstone hand building clay. Personally, I buy it. I buy it from Valentine's, and it comes in bags. It's ready to go, and it's a very nice clay. You can do a lot of slab work with it. It's very good for hand building, but when it comes out of the kiln, it's terribly boring. The surface quality isn't particularly to my liking. So what I tend to do is I give the outer coating on just about everything I make. I coat most of the things that I make with a porcelain slip, and this porcelain slip, I make this up myself. I buy Audrey Blackman porcelain, which is a beautiful porcelain. It's very white, and I came into Audrey Blackman because it's beautiful to throw. And in the days when I was throwing large pieces of porcelain, this is the clay that I use, and I've stayed with it. It's got so many lovely qualities. So as I'm brushing this on, I'm kind of allowing it to miss some of the textured areas, and those textured areas will be nice for picking up the various. I can rub iron oxides into the textures. Then when it gets over glazed with maybe a shiny Saladin glaze, those textures will pick out and just give it a little bit of extra oomph. And also because you know that I've been working with red glazes for many years, and that's what our first kind of real success was with red porcelain. And I've never given up on copper, because I believe that copper is very versatile, and I like to rub a little bit of copper in these little areas so that when the Saladin runs over them, it'll pick up and they'll just give a gentle blush. With most things in ceramics and a lot of art, I think it's actually knowing when to stop. It's not to overdo it. Just look and think, well, is that all right now? Can we stop there? And I think for me, the way that I like to work is very much from observation. So I didn't have a specific absolute idea of what this was going to look like before I started. I had a reasonable idea because I've made a few of them before, but the essential thing is, working from observation, I can allow things to stay, I can pick bits off I don't like, and it's a case of assessment all the time. Clay is fabulously forgiving, and if you make something, you don't like it, as long as it hasn't been through the kiln, well, yeah, let's just start again. So I'm going to put that to one side now. We're going to forget that for a little while, and I'm going to move on to, earlier we looked at this piece of work, and I'm going to do a quick demo to show how we achieve these layers on a piece of work, on a sculpture like this. Again, this is a reasonably stiff piece of clay. It's just short of leathery. This is a plasterer's float, and I found it. Again, it was just serendipity, just sheer chance. I just happened to be working with a piece of clay, and I knew I wanted to have some very thin lines knocked into this piece of clay, And I grabbed the first thing that was in the studio, and I'd been actually plastering the day before, and I picked up this tool, and I think it's really nice to use tools that challenge you. If you use a tool that is inappropriate, it makes you learn an extra technique, if you like. We can all get very, very complacent with the tools that we use and our techniques that we apply. And I think if you kind of stretch yourself just a tad, you throw yourself in at the deep end, you pick up something totally ridiculous, I mean like the plasterer's tool, and you start to use that instead, I think it can take you places where you just wouldn't think that you would necessarily go. So we're going to take an edge off here. And what I'm doing now is I'm starting to build up this layered effect. And if I can just put this in such a way that you're going to see what's going on. Put some fine ones in. I think that top end's just a little bit too round. Let's have some cut off. Yeah. Okay. So, if we lie that down again, and let's take some more pieces out of that. So you might appreciate that was a bit of a struggle. It didn't want to come out easy, and that's part of the enjoyment. It's I'm not always exactly sure where there will be a break, where there'll be a fault line. I think a bit of a spin-off. I think that's potentially a really nice piece of work that I would probably put to one side and come back to that and maybe work on that and make that into something different. Well, I'm going to try an experiment. Because this is a demo piece, we're not going to worry. I hadn't intended to put a hole through this one, but let's go for it. Let's see what we can do. think this might be better if it just has a little angle. Yeah. So, there are various things we can do with the surface. On this particular occasion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a very, very thick porcelain coat, set it aside from the rest, and we'll see if we can crack that porcelain coat. Really lost it. The highlight. Okay, that's today's demo finished. Thank you very much for sticking with me. Week from now, 2 o'clock, Monday, whatever the date is next Monday, it'll be April. I'd be really happy if you would like to come and see me again. So, bye!